Okay, bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So, kita nak ucapkan terima kasih kepada Cik Zarif atas presentation yang dibuatnya. So, selamat datang kepada training Aerodrome Emergency Plan dan Rescue and Firefighting yang akan disampaikan oleh Cik Zarif daripada CM Aerodrome Standard Division. Dan terima kasih kepada semua participants yang hadir. Semoga kita akan dapat manfaat everything yang kita dengar today. So, without further ado, saya jemputlah Encik Zarif untuk memulakan presentation. Silakan.
Assalamualaikum and good morning to everyone. Thank you, Haji, for the introduction. So I am Muhammad Zarif, and the newest addition to your team. I'm taking up the role as your airport and firefighting service, rescue and firefighting service. So I would like to say hello to everyone, and I'll be looking forward to meeting all of you soon. So as Haji said, that probably all of you are much more familiar in this topic than I am. So I do hope at the end of this webinar, you could provide some. I would very much welcome some additional information or any correction that you think is important to the subject. Okay. So as for the presentation, I'll be presenting about the subject of aerodrome operational services equipment and installation, mainly the chapter for 9.1 and 9.2, which is aerodrome emergency plan and rescue and firefighting. So I'll begin. Let's begin. So as I said before, the contents there's just two contents in this webinar: the emergency plan and the rescue and firefighting. The bulk of it will be taken by the rescue and firefighting. Okay, so the first is the aerodrome emergency plan. So the general introduction for this topic is that what a plan is, why a plan is important for operations in an aerodrome. So the plan commensurate preparation is a process to cope with an emergency. Because an emergency is an unexpected event or moment, so it could take someone by surprise, and having a plan would be very much beneficial to a party that would have authorization in that particular vicinity to take action and provide safety measures to ensure that everyone is so that everyone can be assisted properly. So, and as the saying goes, the main thing that we want to overcome in any emergency, the first thing is that tendency for people to panic. So, which is why a plan is very imperative in a emergency event. Now, the objective of the plan is to minimize loss, save lives, health, and maintain the aircraft operation of the airport. So these accidents on the airport can range from something like a runway excursion or incursion, or to something that is more humanistic in nature, which is like something far more serious, like a hostage situation. And next, the plan must also include a coordinated response of agencies. So in an airport, not all the services are provided. For example, if we read throughout the Annex 14, the only emergency services that would be provided at an airport would be the AFRS. So there is a lot of coordination with there is inclusion of services that is outside of the airport. So so the plan also includes coordination between these organizations, which is important because, as we all know, what works? Teamwork. So these organizations will include such as mainly the Malaysian airport staff, the people who are already there, who would know the situation, and PDRM, so they are in charge of things such as security and to, let's say, oppose the any sort of the hostage situation I mentioned earlier, and the Ministry of Health, which is, as we know, currently would play a much big role in the current pandemic that is happening right now and has affected a lot of aviation industries. So the important thing of the important thing to remember here is that these two organizations, for example, are not part of the airport. So as they come in, they would know what is going on exactly. So they would know who has done this and which one has taken the role of what. So it's important that to have a plan so that they know, so that when they come in, they're not completely surprised as to what is going on. All right, so moving along. So as we all know that the in the Annex 14, it is always divided into two main groups, which is the shall and the should. The shall being the mandatory practice that every airport must have, and the should is a recommended practice. So the first three are basically has been set as before. So the first one is that an AEP must always be established at an aerodrome. So if you have an aerodrome, an AEP has to be established there. Oops, sorry about that. And of course, the correct coordination and in opinion of appropriate authority could be of assistance there. So who coordination should be provided, and also which organization would be appropriate to be of assistance in certain situations, because there are very much specific situations that are to be considered. And in the fourth part, in the number 4 is to plan, observe human factors principles. So this is important because, as I said again, in the event of an emergency, people tend to panic, and there will need to be someone to observe human factors on what is, because a human reaction is usually unpredictable. So it is important to take that into consideration on what to do next, on which part of the plan to consider be acted upon. Of course, and there is also the factor of human factor of the personnel that are involved, whether or not their reaction are in the optimum response, so that because they are jumping into danger, so their mentality has to be observed so that they can incorporate their skills properly. And in the should section, let me just clarify that the red box will be the shall and the blue box are the should. So in the should section, the blue section, I'll just say the blue section, coordination with the rescue coordination center as necessary. So there should be a center that coordinate which organization is necessary for this particular emergency. So for example, if you have a runway excursion, it wouldn't be particularly important to have PDRM there, but it will be much more important to have someone from the medical field to be there to take, and of course the AFRS to be there to extract the victims, and of course the medical personnel to treat the victims with any injuries. And number 2 are, well, so this is a list of what should at least be included in the AEP. So the first is type of emergencies, and as I said, that the emergencies are quite specific. So it could range from aircraft accident, full emergency, bomb threats, and hijacks. So agencies involved in the plan, again, it's like PDRM, the Ministry of Health. Responsibility that each role of the agencies and the operation center and command post for each type of emergencies. So again, explain the coordination responsibilities, information and names and telephones, so that you're not using so that the people who are responsible for alerting those agencies, they are not using, maybe the public will be using their public lines, so basic 999 call, but as for the airport operators, they will be using a more direct line, direct hotlines to the organization, so that the organization would know which of their team to be deployed and what to expect. A grid map of the aerodrome, and okay, so this is also important because you need to know at which certain area that the emergency is happening, because in certain airports there are a few areas inside the airport that are not, you'd say, normal. So they could be in areas of water areas or swampy areas. Okay, so the next part is the emergency operations center and command post. So to put this into simplify this, it's an emergency operations center is to be set up by the airport operators to collect the multiple information that are provided by the emergency organizations or the response team. So each response team has a command post that is mobile, because the emergencies doesn't just happen at one particular place, it could happen at anywhere around the airport vicinity. So the command post has to be mobile and has to react quickly, so that they can get there and collect as much information as possible. So these are some of the examples. As you can see, the bottom one is the firefighting command post and the PDRM command post, and of course the medical command post, which usually has a tent set up to treat and check on the victims. And all of this information would be directly sent to the emergency operations center, so that they can make more of a plan that is so that they don't have to think about the immediate response that they have to do, that the people at ground zero have to think about. So so as you can, fixed command post and mobile post has to be established, and so it is required that the emergency operations center is at the airport itself. And so overall, they are responsible for overall coordination and general directions. So they tell the command post what to do, and the command post would relay it to their personnel. And again, the command posts have to move rapidly and take local coordination, so that the people on the ground know what to do and they don't get in each other's way to help people. So that's why coordination is important here. And a person should always be assigned to be in control of either the command post and the operation center, so that they have to make decisions on what to do next. Okay, so the next part is the communication system. So etiquette communication system linking the command post and the emergency operation center is important, so that again they can relay their information back and forth properly and without any interruptions or any disturbance. And I think that as we are familiar, as we are being already presented by Mr. Zainal on the CNS, that is last week. So and here's another example of the organization that will be involved, TM. So they are responsible for coordinating and establish communication protocols including frequency utilization during emergencies at the airport. So this is important to have a direct link between these, to have a very distinct way of communicating so that no information is being jumbled up together and they can organize properly. So it would not be wise to have a single WhatsApp group like that. So I mean, if let's say one information is relayed and then in 10 seconds, 10 more than 10 information is then sent. So they would have to organize through all 10 again. Okay. And so the next part is the aerodrome emergency exercise. So this is a mandatory practice. So the plan should contain procedures of periodic testing. So as we all know, practice makes perfect. And emergencies don't happen every day. So it is important to keep the skill of every personnel on the ground sharp so that they are able to utilize their skills properly, and it becomes sort of second nature when an emergency actually happens. So we do have a we do have a schedule for these. So intervals of not exceeding 2 years. So every 2 years they have to do a full scale aerodrome emergency exercise. So these exercises are, in fact, explained further inside their own plans. And second of a series of modular tests commencing in the first year and concluding a full-scale aerodrome emergency exercise at interval not exceeding 3 years. So the modular tests are what what you'd say the findings from the full-scale test in the first part. So if in the first part, that in the full-scale aerodrome emergency exercise, that they found anything that is insufficient that can be improved upon, they would do that in a series of modular tests commencing in the first year, which is the second part. So it is always reviewed and it is always improved upon, and of course it is always perfected, so that in the event of an emergency, no one will mess up, because again, teamwork is important and everyone needs to do their roles properly. So the next part is the emergencies in difficult environments. So there are two aspects. There are two, again, there is the red box and blue box. So the red box is, again, the shall appropriate specialist rescue services at aerodrome located close to water and swampy areas. And a coordination shall be provided with these people. So in the AFRS at the airport, they are not completely suited to tackle emergencies that has a specific or a different sort of situational in terms of location. So when the location is in a place that is different from what is the usual common ground, so they need the assistance of other specialists that has skills on being able to operate on that terrain and using equipment that could operate on that terrain also. So such equipments are like amphibious rescue vehicles and boats. And of course, these vehicles and equipments are not provided in in the standard AFRS airport headquarters, because their maintenance might not be in the resource or in the budget. So it's sort of like again, it's like the case of the PDRM. So you need to call these personnel, these equipments for assistance. So again, in the you could they could have for airports that are located in these places in where there are where there are difficult terrains. So they could do assessments at a regular interval so that they can better their coordination, because there is a high probability that an emergency could happen there. And an assessment of approach and departure areas within 1,000 of the runway threshold should be carried out to determine options available for intervention. So it's a 1 kilometer sort of radius from the runway, so that they need to consider whether or not how important it is to have these services and to have assessments with these services. Okay, so this is an example that I have taken from the AEP, from an AEP, which is the Langkawi International Airport. So this is an example of the grid map. As you can see that the runway does have a the runway is in very close proximity with a large body of water, which is the sea, as you can see at the end of the runway near the Kuala Muda mark there. And if you can see from the grid map on the right, the blue marks on the runway, those are swampy areas. So, and next is an example of a triage and medical care at aircraft crash site. So, as you can see, there is an example of a command post designated there. A triage of 2% monitoring and tagging people. So again, this is the human principle factor. And so this is just a brief example. So as you can see there in the table of contents, there is a general function and responsibility of organizations. So yeah, the blue circles indicate that these are the should parameters, and the red one is the shall. So so these blue circles indicates the type of emergencies that are provided in this plan. So the next part, they show on they provide the information on the emergency exercises, and as you can see, it will be conducted every 2 years. And finally, as we've seen before in the grid map, because there is a difficult terrain, the swampy areas inside the airport, they do have a coordination with the agency that is appropriate, which is the Agency Penguatkuasaan Maritime Malaysia. So the next part of this presentation will be about the rescue and firefighting. So the firefighting service main objective is to save lives in the emergency at or near an aerodrome. So, and to maintain survivable conditions, provide escape and rescue to those in need. As you can see, that the main objective of this organization or this board of these services is to save lives. So it is not about saving the aircraft or anything, because the aircraft are usually insured. So it's about saving lives. So once the lives are saved, the job of the AFRS is basically over. Once everyone is in a once everyone inside the aircraft is already considered saved, and everyone is evacuated properly. So and the aircraft can be left to burn. Well, if they want to. So factors of effectiveness, again, is training, equipment, and response time of personnel. Now, as for the last point of this part, combat buildings and field farm fires, foaming runway are not taken into account. So to clarify that the AFRS does not actually respond to any, they are not responsible, they're not obligated to respond to any fire that has occurred at the terminal building. So it is mainly fires that occurred from an aircraft. So to further explain this, because every airport has a designated category that is set upon them, and upon that category, a limited amount of a specific amount of AFRS equipment and personnel would be designated to that airport. So if the minimum requirement for aircraft operations to continue, that category of the airport has to be sustained. So every time so if let's say a terminal building is caught on fire or something, so if a terminal building is caught on fire and a vehicle has been deployed, that would mean that the category of the airport safety has gone down by 1, or it depends. If they have a spare, maybe it won't, but if they don't, it would go down by 1, and operations and flight operations has to be stopped immediately. So again, combat building fires and fuel farms, which is just the storage of fuels, are not taken into account, and foaming of runway are removed as of 2015, I believe, because it is considered to be just a waste of foam. So the next part is the application, and this is a mandatory practice. So rescue and firefighting equipment and services shall be provided at the aerodrome. Now there is a exception in the notes that a fire station can be off the aerodrome, but with the exception that they can respond in time. So where an aerodrome is located close to water and swampy areas, difficult terrains, specialist rescue services and firefighting equipment appropriate to hazard risk shall be available. So again, this is just as mentioned before. It can be provided by another organization. So this is, as I mentioned before, the level of protection provided. So the level of protection provided by the AFRS to the airport would be determined by the largest, would be determined by a table that has a list of the largest, that has a characteristic of the largest airplane, that would designate the level of protection. So from the blue and the red box, it is actually the same statement, but in the red box, it is said that with the exception of busiest consecutive movements, the category can be lessened by 1. So the highest category normally used, the aerodrome, is less than 700, which means that the category of the level of protection is set by the largest airplane. But considering the movement of that aeroplane within the busiest consecutive 3 months, so if it's less than 700, then it can be considered to a lower level of protection. So this is the table that determines the level of protection that is provided to the airport. So for example here, an Airbus 300, the length is 63.67. So that would put it around category 9, 61 to 76. And then we have to look at the fuselage width, which is 5.64. So it is below 7 meters. So that if the airport has the Airbus 330 as the biggest airplane in that vicinity or operating at that airport, so the category of that aerodrome would be 9. That's the level of protection that they will have. So these points here, they indicate on how to use this table. So it's that's just a brief explanation there. So yeah, I determined by the youngest airplane and fuselage width greater than the maximum. So yeah. So if let's say the fuselage width is higher than 7, then it would go to the category 10, just in case. And during anticipated periods of reduced activity, so for example, which is like now, so it's still the same as to what it was before. So the next part is the extinguishing agent. So the extinguishing agent for the AFRS mainly used are foam. It's not basic. It's not using normal firefighting agents, which is just water. So both principal and complementary agents should normally be provided at aerodrome. So the foam is used. So the foam is used as the principal, and the complementary is usually the dry chemical powder. So that's just like a small backup, or for a small fire. So you use the complementary extinguishing agent. You don't have to use the foam. Now the foam is mainly used for fire suppression. It's a role to cool the fire and to coat the fuel, preventing its contact with oxygen, resulting in suppression of the combustion. So this is basically to choke out the fire. So to prevent oxygen and prevent oxygen from igniting the fire again and causing a burn back. Which is basically, once the fire is extinguished, there is a chance that the fire could ignite again. So that's why foam is used. Now again, so like the fire triangle. So oxygen, heat, fuel, those are the 3 main elements to produce fire. So this is all about the foam that is used. So the foam that is mainly used in Malaysia is a level B foam instead of level A. So the amount that they have are all assigned by a table, another table, table 9.2. So there, the red box here, there is an exception for categories 1 and 2, which means that the airport isn't that large. So 100% of water may be substituted with complementary agents. So they don't necessarily have to use foam in this case. And from January 2015, at aerodrome where operation by larger size, quantities of water shall be recalculated, and the amount of water for foam production and discharge rate for foam solution shall be increased accordingly. So this is to provide further assessment on the particular aerodrome. So in case that there is a larger airplane that would start operating in a airport that has already designated its category and particular runway. rather than the main fire station at the first runway. So the next part is the communication and alerting system. Now this is something that we are familiar with, which is the discrete communication system, which is one is just a typical fire alarm. So pull it down and it will alert the whole vicinity or the whole compound on the immediate threat that is occurring. And alerting system for rescue and firefighting personnel capable of operate from the fire station. So this is just a way of communicating between so that you in case that the emergency is not that doesn't happen in an obvious vicinity of the fire station, so they are not aware of that situation, so that they are alerted, and they could be alerted. So the ones that have the best vantage point for any airport would be actually would be the people in the control tower. So they have a proper communication with the communication link with the AFRS HQ, so that they could alert them. So the next part is the personnel. So about personnel, so they need to be properly trained in their duties in an efficient manner and shall participate in live fire drills. So again, like the AEP provided, and there should be fire drills that commence every 2 years, so that to keep their skills sharp. And of course, individually, that they need to have training in human performance, so they need to be in peak condition to be able to utilize their skills properly and efficiently. And of course, as your capabilities as a human can take you so far, you need the assistance of provided protective clothing and respiratory equipment, because you're going into a significant amount of smoke when dealing with fire. So that could affect your performance. So which is why equipment such as respiratory equipment are important, and protective clothing, because we are not fireproof. Okay, so in the next section, it's still in the personnel section, personnel, and this is just the blue box. So sufficient trained, competent personnel should be designated and readily available to ride and rescue, to ride the rescue and firefighting vehicles and to operate the equipment at maximum capacity. So they always need to be on the ready to react to any calls or alerts for an emergency. So some consideration could be given for personnel to use hand lines, ladders, and other firefighting equipment. So they need to be fully ready. This is basically to explain the readiness of the personnel, so that they're not lagging when it comes to reacting, when it comes to responding to the emergency alert. And in determining the minimum number of rescue and firefighting personnel required, so a task of resource analysis and should be completed, so that they know how much service is needed and how much resources they have, so that they can provide the proper and efficient service to the airport. So usually that in this case, they look at the airport level of protection. So the airport category 1, 2, 3, or 10, and up to 10. So that will usually tell how much equipment they use, how much vehicle they use, and therefore how much personnel they need to operate everything. And that comes to an end of this webinar. Thank you for your time listening. So it's time for the Q&A session.